Trading at Schwab is now powered by Ameritrade, giving you even more specialized support than ever before. Like access to the trade desk, our team of passionate traders ready to tackle anything from the most complex trading questions to a simple strategy gut check. Need assistance? No problem. Get 24/7 professional answers and live help, and access support by phone, email, and in-platform chat. That's how Schwab is here for you, to help you trade brilliantly. Learn more at schwab.com/trading. Trading at Schwab is now powered by Ameritrade, bringing you an expanding library of education with even more ways to sharpen your trading skills. Access new online courses, insightful webcasts, articles, engaging videos, and more, all curated just for traders. Plus, guided learning paths with content designed to fit your unique interests. No sifting to find exactly what you need, so you can spend your time learning to trade brilliantly. Learn more at schwab.com/trading.
You're listening to Reverie True Crime, your gateway to the darkest corners of human nature, where we expose the hidden truths of human depravity. These harrowing stories serve as a sobering reminder to keep our senses keen and our awareness sharp, for predators lurk in unexpected places, patiently waiting and observing. Join us as we unravel mysteries, explore motives, and seek justice for victims as we bring awareness to these cases. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. I wanted to do this episode ever since Cassie Ventura filed her lawsuit against Sean Diddy Combs in November of 2023. I've seen a flood of victim blaming and hateful comments directed at Cassie ever since, but especially since she had to take the stand in Diddy's racketeering and sex trafficking trial. So many people have asked, why now? Why didn't she just leave? Or why would she go back to him if it was really that bad? Those questions and those judgments ignore everything we know about what abuse does to the brain, to a person's sense of self, and to their reality. First, we're going to walk through the lawsuit that Cassie filed in 2023, and then we'll get into the testimony that she gave just last month when she took the stand during Diddy's trial. Cassie was just a young woman when she stepped into the spotlight. She was introduced to the world beside one of the most powerful men in music and business. What followed were years of coercion, violence, and control that most people never saw. From the outside, it looked like luxury and love, but behind closed doors, it was something else completely. There were always whispers about their relationship and about Diddy parties, but the rumors seemed too outrageous to be real. And in the world Diddy built, where money and influence often could make the truth disappear, many people either looked away or did not want to believe it. But now, Cassie has bravely reclaimed her voice. It's time we stop asking why she didn't leave and start asking what kept her trapped and what we can learn from it. We'll also go through the abuse that Cassie suffered: physical, mental, emotional, and sexual. Also, the ways she was trapped, not only by the violence, but by the trauma that rewires the brain. As a side note, some studies suggest that abuse affects the brains of men and women in different ways. Since we're discussing this specific case today, with a woman being victim blamed, I will use the female brain as an example in this episode. I will definitely do another episode in the near future talking about the abused male brain and how the impacts are a little different. So let's get right into it. First, let's go through the most recognized types of abuse and what the signs are before we get into the lawsuit filed by Cassie and her testimony from Diddy's trial. Psychological/emotional abuse. This includes narcissistic abuse, which is manipulation and control by someone with narcissistic traits, which includes gaslighting, devaluation, and idolize, discard cycles. Gaslighting, making the victim doubt their own memory, perception, or sanity. Verbal abuse, yelling, insults, threats, belittling, or constant criticism. Intimidation, using looks, gestures, or destruction to instill fear. Blaming and shaming, making the victim feel responsible for the abuse. Isolation, controlling who the victim sees, talks to, or spends time with. We move on to physical abuse, hitting, slapping, punching, choking, or strangling, kicking, shoving, or restraining, withholding medical care, using weapons or objects to harm, sleep deprivation, forcing substance abuse. Now we move on to sexual abuse, rape or attempted rape, sexual coercion, which is pressuring or manipulating someone into sexual acts, sexual assault, which is unwanted touching or groping, reproductive coercion, which is controlling contraception, pregnancy, or forced abortion, incest or childhood sexual abuse, withholding sex as punishment, sexual shaming or degradation. Then there's financial/economic abuse, controlling finances, which includes taking paychecks and denying access to money, sabotaging employment, which is preventing the victim from working, stealing money or assets, creating financial dependency, coerced debt, which is forcing someone to take out loans or open credit in their name. Then we have cultural/spiritual abuse, mocking or attacking spiritual beliefs, forcing religious practices, preventing the practice of one's religion or culture, using cultural norms to justify control or violence. Then there's digital/technological abuse, cyberstalking, GPS tracking or surveillance, monitoring phones, emails, or social media, revenge porn or non-consensual sharing of intimate images, impersonation online, or identity theft. Then we have neglect, failure to provide basic needs like food, shelter, clothing, medical care, lack of supervision, abandonment, and medical neglect. This is more commonly seen in child abuse and elder abuse. Elder abuse and child abuse are also two of the most recognized types of abuse. So, elder abuse includes financial exploitation, physical or emotional harm, neglect in care facilities, and abuse by caregivers or family members. Child abuse includes physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, exposure to domestic violence, neglect, parental alienation, overt or covert incest/emotional enmeshment. And then we have legal abuse, using the legal system to intimidate or control, dragging out custody battles, filing baseless lawsuits, threatening deportation in immigrant situations. Last on the list is coercive control, which is often a mix of the different types of abuses. It's a pattern that combines several forms of abuse to dominate and control a victim's life. This includes isolation, intimidation, surveillance, threats, and depriving the victim of their independence. So let's dig into the lawsuit Cassie Ventura filed in 2023. This was when she first shared the experiences that she had with her ex, Sean Diddy Combs, and it shocked people all over the world. This is also when I first saw the victim blaming towards Cassie all over social media, spreading like wildfire. According to the lawsuit, Cassie Ventura was only 19 when she met Sean Diddy Combs. She was a young artist, an aspiring singer, trying to make her way in the music industry. He was already a larger than life figure, older, powerful, charming to many, and dangerous. What started as a promising relationship quickly spiraled into something destructive behind the glamour of fame and success. Diddy signed Cassie to his label and began to groom her, control her appearance, her behavior, her relationships, and her freedom. Soon she was living under his control, emotionally isolated, and increasingly subjected to emotional manipulation and sexual coercion. By the time she was in her early 20s, Cassie alleged that Diddy introduced her to a world of forced drug use, prescription pills, and unwanted sexual experiences. He demanded sex at all hours, regardless of her consent or mental state, and often filmed it without her permission. She described a terrifying routine, which included being coerced into taking drugs like GHB and ecstasy, then being required to perform sexual acts, sometimes with others, while he watched or participated, making sure he was always in control.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
According to Cassie, he funded what he called freak-offs, explicit sexual encounters involving male sex workers that Cassie says she never wanted but participated in out of fear and survival. Diddy would often record these encounters and use the footage as leverage, threatening to release it if she ever left or disobeyed him. The abuse, she said, was not only sexual, it was physical and violent. Cassie described being beaten sometimes so badly she had to seek medical attention. In one incident, she said Diddy stomped on her while she was curled up on the floor. In another, he blew up in a jealous rage and dragged her out of bed, smashing furniture, hitting her, and threatening her life. She lived in a state of constant fear, knowing that her safety, career, and reputation were always at risk. Even when she tried to leave him, Cassie said he stalked her. She recalled an incident where he broke into her apartment, slammed her against the wall, and took her phone. She said that she feared for her life in that moment, and many others, and yet felt powerless to escape. Despite years of trauma, Cassie stayed quiet. She said the imbalance of power, like his wealth, his influence, and his capabilities, kept her paralyzed. Even when she broke off the relationship in 2018, the fear was still there, and the memories haunted her. She says that she spent years trying to heal, trying to move on and reclaim her voice. In response to the lawsuit, Diddy denied the allegations, but just one day after the lawsuit became public, the case was quickly settled out of court. Fast forward to now, 2025. Let's go through some of her recent testimony during Diddy's racketeering and sex trafficking trial. Cassie Ventura took the stand, pregnant, in a very stressful situation very close to her due date. What she was about to revisit wasn't just about the past, it was about how she survived, and now she was taking her power back. She began by confirming the basics. She was 38 years old now, an entertainer by trade, and had spent over a decade of her life in a relationship with Sean Diddy Combs. The years, she said, had been a chaotic mix of highs and terrifying lows. She told the courtroom, quote, "There were good times, but if they were violent arguments, it would usually result in some sort of physical abuse and dragging, just different things." End quote. She described him stomping on her head, dragging her across rooms, and kicking her when she was already down. The prosecutor asked her how often the violence occurred. She said, quote, "Too frequently." The courtroom listened in silence as she spoke about the freak-offs, the term that Diddy used for planned sex parties and demanded she take part in, often with paid escorts while he watched. She was barely 22 when it all started. Cassie said the first time he asked her, she was, quote, "confused, nervous, but I loved him very much." That love, after being twisted and manipulated over the years, became another kind of trap. Cassie described how she felt when Diddy proposed the first freak-off. Quote, "My stomach fell to my butt. Just the nervousness and confusion in that moment." But she didn't feel she could say no, going on to say, quote, "I didn't know what no could be or what no could turn into." She learned quickly that no could lead to blackmail, violence, and or punishment. Her career, her body, even her clothing, everything about her, she said, was under Diddy's control. She went on to say, quote, "I just didn't have much say in it at the time." End quote. At one point, the prosecution showed the court still shots from the 2016 hotel surveillance video now seen around the world, where Sean Combs was caught on camera violently attacking her. Cassie identified the images, saying, quote, "We were having an encounter called a freak-off, and I was leaving there." End quote. The implication was clear that this act of defiance, of trying to leave, had triggered another episode of abuse. Asked again why it was so difficult to just say no to his demands, she said she feared the violence, and she was also scared that he would release blackmail videos from the encounters that he'd filmed. Quote, "Sean is a really polarizing person, also really charming. It's hard to really be able to decide in that moment what you need when he's telling you what he wants." End quote. And when she was asked if she had ever truly known what would happen if she refused, she answered honestly, saying, "I didn't know. I didn't know what would happen." Before this testimony began, a judge had ruled that her husband, Alex Fine, could sit in the courtroom, except during the section when Cassie would discuss her rape allegation against Diddy from 2018. Defense attorneys had claimed they might call Alex as a witness later in an attempt to challenge whatever Cassie said. But in these early hours on the stand, it was Cassie's story alone, one that began when she was a teenager, newly signed to Bad Boy Records in 2006. She spoke about how it all began and how what seemed like a mentor relationship had turned into something confusing and overwhelming. At her 21st birthday party in Las Vegas, she said that Diddy kissed her in the bathroom of his hotel suite. Quote, "I was just really confused at the time, and young." End quote. What followed were invitations to luxury hotel rooms in New York under the guise of talking about music, but those meetings introduced her to much more than songwriting. That's when Cassie testified that she was introduced to the idea of oral sex. It was a turning point. She said she was sexually inexperienced and that Diddy was 17 years older, already very experienced in a world that she had barely stepped into. Later, during a trip to Miami, after an afternoon of wine, Diddy gave her ecstasy. That night, she said they had sex for the first time on a boat. The drug blurred her judgment. That moment changed their entire relationship. "I felt closer to him. I thought we were monogamous," she said. But in time, she realized she was wrong. Quote, "Sean Combs had many girlfriends." End quote. As her relationship with Diddy became more serious, so did his control. Cassie described how even making the wrong face could result in being slapped. "Next thing I knew, I was getting hit in the face," she told the jury. And when she didn't pick up his calls right away, he wouldn't just blow up her phone. He would involve his staff, including security, in finding her. Even the apartments he rented for her in New York and LA became part of the trap. Quote, "He had his own set of keys. He made a lot of unannounced visits." End quote. In LA, their apartments were so close he could reach her by golf cart. In New York, her place was only a few blocks from his. At the time, she admitted that she was quote-unquote insanely jealous, but she chalked it up to being young. Quote, "I didn't get that he was him. As he would say, I'm Puff Daddy. Puff Daddy has many rules and likes the company of women." End quote. Yet he told her he wasn't seeing anyone else. She said he told her it's just us. So she stayed. Then came the freak-offs. The first one, she said, happened when she was 22. It was coordinated, planned, and terrifying. Afterward, she said she felt dirty, confused, and relieved. Quote, "He was really happy with me. I did something right." End quote. That approval became her motivator. She said she didn't want to make him angry and didn't want him to regret, quote unquote, sharing something so personal. So she went along with it. What began as an isolated incident became her life. They happened weekly. Sometimes they lasted 4 days straight. Cassie said that she'd spend 36 to 48 hours in these sessions, surrounded by drugs and strangers. She needed days to recover physically and emotionally. The freak-offs became a job, she said. Her time, her energy, and her body were all consumed by it. Her biggest dream was to have a music career, and then, when she finally had it, it faded into the background. Cassie said she recorded hundreds of songs, even enough for 9 albums, but most were never released. Quote, "Much of my week went toward the freak-offs," end quote. She testified about one night during a freak-off at Diddy's LA home. His bodyguard burst in, breathless, telling Diddy that Suge Knight, Diddy's longtime rival, was nearby at Mel's Drive-In. Without hesitation, Diddy threw on black clothes, opened a safe, and grabbed guns. He and his bodyguard loaded into an SUV. Quote, "I was crying. I was screaming, like, please don't do anything stupid. I didn't know what they were going to do. It's like I wasn't even there." End quote. When Diddy got back, he didn't say what happened, but he didn't need to. The message was clear that his world moved fast, recklessly, and she was always caught in the middle. Each freak-off was carefully arranged. Cassie recalled a blow-up pool placed in a hotel room filled with baby oil. 10 bottles of Johnson's baby oil were often used for each event. Quote, "I was told to get inside in my outfit and shoes." End quote. It was performative. It was so humiliating. And it was constant. She admitted to using drugs during every single one of those encounters. When the prosecutor asked her why, Cassie didn't hesitate. Quote, "For me, it was dissociative and numbing. I couldn't imagine myself doing any of that without having some sort of buffer or way not to feel it for what it really was, which was emotionless sex with a stranger that I didn't really want to have sex with." End quote. It wasn't just the sex, though. It was the feeling of being disconnected from her own body, her own will. Cassie said she was quote unquote heavily objectified during these organized sessions. She spoke about trying to rush through the acts, not out of pleasure, but just to reach the part she could tolerate, alone time with Diddy. Even then, it was complicated. Quote, "It was his fantasy. He was controlling the whole situation. He was directing it." End quote. Sometimes, she said, she was forced to repeat sex acts with the same escort. Other times, there were multiple men in one encounter. She identified several of the male escorts from pictures shown to the jury, some by name, others only by nickname, like the Punisher. He didn't always stay in the room either. Sometimes Diddy watched from another room through FaceTime. Other times, Cassie testified, his staff had access to the recordings. Cassie said she remembered, quote unquote, feeling insane when Diddy began recording the encounters. She said that he explained it was for him, for after. Sometimes they'd even rewatch the footage during sex. She deleted what she could from her own devices, but the rest, recorded on his phones, were stored elsewhere, accessible to employees. Then the court saw footage from the 2016 hotel security video of Diddy dragging and kicking her near a hotel elevator. Jurors shifted their eyes from the monitors to Cassie, as if trying to reconcile the woman on the screen with the one in the room with them. The defense, meanwhile, began attempting to push its own narrative. Escort Daniel Phillip returned to the stand, and Diddy's attorney suggested that Daniel had been infatuated with Cassie, that he had wanted her for himself. Daniel denied it, but admitted to being attracted to her. Quote, If she ever gave me the chance to date her, I absolutely would have, end quote. Still, he was clear. Diddy had directed the encounters. It wasn't about romance or personal choice. It was about power. The judge thought about allowing the defense to introduce texts between Cassie and Diddy about a bar fight she was allegedly involved in back in Connecticut. The defense argued this showed that not all of their relationship issues revolved around freak-offs. They wanted to paint a picture of a volatile, complex relationship, one that revolved around substance use, jealousy, and violence on both sides. Meanwhile, the press fought for access to the graphic materials shown only to the jury. These were images and stills from the videos that Cassie described. The judge, balancing privacy against the public's right to know, said that he was leaning toward releasing some of it, but not yet. Cassie returned to the stand that Wednesday morning. The courtroom got quiet as prosecutor Emily Johnson resumed her questions. She began by recalling the 2016 hotel incident in LA. Cassie described how Diddy had thrown a vase of flowers at her. Quote, I just remember it coming towards me. I remember hitting a wall. End quote. The aftermath was visible, with her lips swollen and having a black eye darkening beneath sunglasses. Photos she had taken during her Uber ride home were shown to the jury. The injuries told their own story. A friend saw her as soon as she walked into her apartment. She'd seen Cassie like this before, black eyes and split lips. Her friend felt rage and helplessness and called the police. But when the officers arrived, Cassie couldn't bring herself to speak the truth. Quote, in that moment, I didn't want to hurt him that way. I wasn't ready. End quote. Even after that night, he didn't stop. He continued texting and calling. Diddy was telling her that the police were about to arrest him, and when she would not pick up the phone, he sent a message that sounded like a threat dressed as despair. Quote, you'll never hear my voice again. 2 days later, they were photographed together at a red carpet premiere. Cassie wore sunglasses to hide the bruises. At one point during the event, she snuck into a popcorn closet to change clothes so the bruises on her legs would not be seen. It was a cycle that she couldn't escape physically or emotionally. Diddy had threatened several times to release recordings of the freak-offs. It was a constant source of fear. Quote, I feared for my career. I feared for my family. It's just embarrassing. It's horrible and disgusting. No one should do that to anyone. End quote. When asked if she ever fought back, Cassie explained that in the earlier years of their relationship, she tried, but she quickly learned it only made things worse. Quote, it could escalate the fight more, make it worse for myself. End quote. As she looked through the photos, Cassie identified 13 male sex workers that she said she had recruited for freak-offs in places like Las Vegas, Miami, and LA. She had sex with all of them, though she couldn't recall their names. Some she only knew by nicknames. One was advertised as the Punisher. Recovery from these sessions became a routine of its own. IV drips, massages, meals cooked by a private chef. But nothing seemed to fix what was really wrong. Cassie testified that she developed an opioid addiction. Quote, opioids made me feel numb, which is why I relied on them so heavily. End quote. She suffered from frequent urinary tract infections and said the emotional toll left her feeling hollow. Quote, just really empty, and I felt just gross. End quote. And yet, after each one, she still felt like she had fulfilled her purpose, saying, I did my job. There were times when the freak-offs included escorts who brought their girlfriends along. One time, Cassie said she ended up having sex with an escort at a sex club. She told Diddy that going to those places made her uncomfortable, especially seeing him with other women. She told him, I'm not into seeing the person you're in love with somebody else. But he continued to push, telling her that it would be fun and they wouldn't stay long. And then there was 2013. Cassie was packing for a music festival in Canada where Drake was performing. There were friends in the room, and that alone seemed to set something off. Diddy scuffled with them, then turned his anger on her, throwing her into a bed frame. Cassie told the jury about a moment she would never forget. It was the night she suffered a quote-unquote pretty significant gash above her left eye. After an outburst from Diddy, his security team rushed her to a plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills. The cut was deep enough to need stitches. Afterwards, she texted Diddy a photo of her bloodied face and wrote, so you can remember. His response? You don't know when to stop. You pushed it too far and continued to push. Sad. At the Cannes Film Festival that same year, Cassie was glowing as she was being photographed. But behind the scenes, she said she had no place to sleep. Diddy, who was angry and accusing her of taking drugs from him, kicked her off the yacht they were staying on. She was barefoot. Her passport and belongings were left behind. Cassie ended up crashing at a hotel where some of Diddy's employees were staying. Later, during the flight back to New York, Diddy played a video on his laptop. It was a recording from one of the freak-offs. Cassie was mortified. She testified that he warned her that he could embarrass her, ruin her career, and destroy her image. The prosecutor asked, there were people around you? And she nodded, saying yes. That evening, after they landed and went out to dinner, they had another freak-off. At one point, she had compared herself to Tina Turner, saying to Diddy, you treat me like Ike. Prosecutors had begun cataloging notable events of violence that Cassie said she endured. The first, she testified, came in 2007. They had been at dinner with friends when she caught him flirting. Someone at the table gave her a look. She just shrugged. Later that night, in the car, Diddy attacked her. Quote, he knocked me around and he was just hitting me. I was shocked. End quote. Years later, in 2011, Cassie returned home for Christmas with bruises. She told her mother it was the first time he'd ever hit her. It wasn't. The jurors were shown photographs of large, dark bruises across her lower back, shoulder, and thigh. One of those attacks happened after she started dating the rapper Kid Cudi. When Diddy found out, she said that he lunged at her with a corkscrew and kicked her in the back. Some acts of violence would even spill over into her friendships. She recalled watching him drag one of her friends back over the railing of a balcony and throw her onto patio furniture. Another time, he struck a longtime friend of hers in the head with a hammer. Quote, it just ended our friendship. End quote. By the time she ended the relationship in 2018, Cassie said she was experiencing full-blown PTSD. She blacked out sometimes, sleepwalked, and her body and mind were in constant survival mode. She testified that Diddy raped her in her Los Angeles apartment in 2018 after she had told him that she was ending their relationship. She had agreed to meet him for dinner in Malibu, hoping for closure after a decade of pain, but he followed her home. He ignored her pleas to leave, and then he forced his way in. Later, she saw him again, once more. This time, it was a consensual encounter. When asked why, Cassie said, quote, "We'd been together for over 10 years. You just don't turn feelings off. Like, I didn't hate him." The prosecutor asked, "How many freak-offs did you participate in?" "Impossible to know," she said. "Maybe hundreds?" By 2023, it all came crashing down. She was filming a music video when the flashbacks became too much to bear. She went home and told her husband Alex, quote, "You can do this without me. You don't need me here anymore." She was overwhelmed, drowning in memories. On the stand, she said, quote, "I couldn't take the pain anymore." Cassie walked to the front door and tried to step into traffic, but her husband stopped her. Weeks after her emotional collapse, Cassie entered rehab and began trauma therapy. Her healing journey was only just beginning, but in November of 2023, she made a decision that would change everything. She filed a civil lawsuit against Sean Diddy Combs, publicly alleging the years of rape, trafficking, and abuse that she had endured. The case was resolved the very next day for $20 million. When asked in court why she chose to testify now, she said, quote, "I can't carry this anymore. I can't carry the shame, the guilt." End quote. On the third day of testimony, the defense pushed back. The judge began the morning by denying their request to introduce explicit text between Cassie and Diddy. But as cross-examination began, Diddy's attorney tried a softer approach. She asked about the years Cassie had loved Diddy. There were emails, texts, and affectionate nicknames like Pop Pop and Baby Girl. The defense attorney read out warm exchanges between them, with Cassie saying in one message, "I love you so much. I'm a lucky woman." The contrast was jarring. There had been 3 days of graphic, violent testimony that were now being followed by messages of affection from earlier years. Cassie acknowledged the complexity of it all. Quote, "I had fallen in love with him and cared about him very much." End quote. But soon the defense would switch course, going back to the freak-offs. They showed messages where Cassie had appeared to express excitement. In one exchange, Diddy asked, quote, "When do you want to freak off?" Cassie responded, "I'm always ready to freak off." The defense attorney had Cassie read explicit messages out loud in court, word by word. The prosecutor objected repeatedly, but the judge overruled many of them. Cassie stayed composed, explaining that at the time she was trying to please someone that she believed she loved. She admitted that she was confused, isolated, and following Diddy's lead through this sexual world that she had not chosen. As their relationship progressed, the cracks in their relationship became a little more obvious, even in their written conversations. In an email from December of 2009, Cassie begged for something deeper. Quote, In order for me to be more open with the things that we do in bed, I need to feel safe, like home, like this is my husband and this is the only man that will ever have this aggressive sexual side of me. When the defense attorney suggested that Cassie had ruined Diddy's career by making their private life public, Cassie responded, quote, "I could understand that." There was no venom in her voice at all. She just sounded really exhausted. Cassie testified that early on she wore wigs and masquerade masks to hide her identity during the freak-offs. Neither of them wanted her face to be recognized. Quote, "I definitely didn't want anyone to know. The encounter itself was pretty crazy. I really followed his lead on that because I had never done it before." End quote. Asked if she thought the freak-offs resembled a swinger lifestyle, Cassie replied, quote, "In a sexual way, but they're very different." End quote. Then came this question. Was Sean Combs an addict? Cassie answered carefully at first, quote, "I would say he's an addict." The defense attorney asked, "To what?" Cassie hesitated, saying, "Success." Then, when prompted further, she added, "Opiates." The courtroom had barely settled back in when the defense team hinted that their questioning of Cassie might stretch through the end of the week. With her due date approaching really fast, both sides had agreed that her testimony should wrap up by then. By now, Cassie might have to return the following Monday for redirect. Inside the courtroom, Diddy, now 55 years old, his once iconic image marked by gray hair and reading glasses, sat quietly at the defense table. During breaks, he would chat with attorneys, occasionally turning towards the gallery to acknowledge reporters with a polite, "How you doing?" As cross-examination dragged on, there was definitely frustration at certain times. At one point, when the defense attorney pointed out a text message without context, Cassie looked back towards the judge and said, quote, "This isn't about what I feel is relevant right now, right? Because there's a lot we skipped over." End quote. Jurors leaned in to their monitors, reading along as explicit messages between Cassie and Diddy were displayed. One woman shook her head slowly during a particularly graphic exchange. The defense painted a picture of a complicated relationship, not just abuse, but jealousy, codependence, and moments of warmth. Cassie admitted feeling quote-unquote some jealousy toward Kim Porter, the mother of Diddy's children, who is now deceased, and as a little side note, people have been wanting an investigation into her death for quite a few years. Cassie remembered the pain of Diddy leaving a freak-off to see Kim Porter at another hotel. She recalled holidays where he was with his family and not with her. But jealousy went both ways. Cassie said she had a burner phone to speak with rapper Kid Cudi, and Diddy, who was threatened by Kid Cudi's rising success, was often enraged. When she was filming a movie in South Africa, Cassie found messages from Diddy to another woman. She blocked him. Briefly, she began dating Michael B. Jordan. Cassie sent a text in 2013 that said, quote, "You're making me look like a side piece, and that's not what I thought I was." Yet, even with the broken trust, Diddy maintained the double standard. Cassie was not to see anyone else while he continued his own affairs. The defense also revisited Cassie's drug use. Cassie acknowledged her struggles, even admitting that Diddy once told dealers to stop delivering drugs to her. She said he had even urged her to get help, though she believed it was more about control. Quote, "He only wanted me to do drugs with him, not with friends." End quote. Messages were shown where Cassie initiated or expressed enthusiasm about the freak-offs. In 2013, a text message she wrote said, quote, "Wish we could have FO'd before you left." And in 2017, she texted, quote, "I love our FOs when we both want it." But Cassie explained that those words did not tell the full story. The performance, the language, the willing tone, they were part of the role that she had to play. Quote, "I just didn't want to make him angry. I wanted to do something right." End quote. The defense showed messages exchanged before the now infamous 2016 freak-off that ended with the security camera footage of Diddy dragging and kicking Cassie in an elevator hallway. These messages suggested that the couple had taken a quote-unquote bad batch of MDMA that night. Cassie said again what she had told the judge before, that this wasn't the full story, not even close. With each passing hour in the courtroom, the stakes got higher, and not just for Diddy, but for Cassie. Prosecutors were worried that she might go into labor with her third child and urged the judge to make the defense wrap up their questions before the end of the week. Cross-examination resumed Friday morning. Diddy's defense attorney returned her focus back to that hotel surveillance video. The jury watched this footage in silence. Afterwards, she asked Cassie to read a text that she had written to Diddy after the incident. In it, Cassie had pleaded for dignity and humanity. Quote, "I am not a rag doll. I'm somebody's child." End quote. His attorney pressed on, showing that just days later, Cassie had texted Diddy saying, "We need a different vibe from Friday." It was one of many messages where the pair expressed love, even in the aftermath of violence. This was what made the case so layered, so human. The contradictions weren't evidence of lies, they were evidence of trauma. Cassie told the jury how Diddy could not stand the idea of her giving any attention to another man, even during the periods when they were apart. He took her phone many times. There was a time he took her phone when she was speaking to a football player, and another time was when he suspected her of dancing with Chris Brown. Cassie denied the latter. Quote, "He was possessive, but I learned to stop questioning it." The jury was played a recording from 2013. It was Cassie's own voice, weary and desperate. She's heard screaming at a male friend who claimed to have seen a video of her performing sex acts. She begged him to see the video. Then she snapped, quote, "I've never killed anyone in my life, but I will kill you." The room took in the weight of that threat, not as violence, but as a snapshot of this person coming undone under the amount of so much pressure. Cassie confirmed that Diddy later made efforts to keep the video from being released. The defense shifted gears to 2023. Cassie was asked about her stay at a women's treatment center, where programs included sex addiction, love addiction, and sexual compulsivity therapy. Diddy's attorney pushed the question, had Cassie been treated for any of these? No. Instead, Cassie told the court that she received neurofeedback therapy. They hooked her brain up to sensors while she watched visual stimuli that helped regulate her brain waves. Quote, "It was to help me process trauma," end quote. She also underwent EMDR therapy, a widely used treatment for PTSD. Cassie described it like this, quote, "You go back into a memory, a moment where you couldn't escape a room, but through therapy, you learn how to experience it differently, and you escape," end quote. And then she said the final break came in August of 2018. She saw a picture of Diddy with another woman. He'd been seeing this woman during the last stretch of their relationship. For Cassie, that was it. She refused to keep going through all the pain. By the end of it all, after years of alleged abuse, surveillance, coercion, and compliance, Cassie found herself staring at the remnants of what had once been a dream of music, love, and success. A dream that came true when she was barely out of her teenage years, and a man nearly 2 decades older made her feel seen, only to make her feel invisible. In the picture, Diddy stood beside another woman, a woman that Cassie had long suspected never really left the picture. She texted him shortly after, saying, quote, "I just don't trust anymore. That last shot put the nail in the coffin." And she told him that he lied to her, that she never really went away. That moment wasn't just heartbreaking, it was also an eye-opener. Cassie said it was then she knew she had to leave, and this time for good. Soon after, she began dating the man who would become her husband, Alex Fine. On the stand, the defense attorney pressed Cassie, trying to poke holes in her story. Quote, "You didn't hate him then and you don't hate him now?" Cassie answered with a strong calmness, saying, "I don't hate him." "Do you still love him?" She said, "I have love for the past, what it was." Cassie acknowledged that she and Diddy had consensual sex after the alleged rape and that their messages, some sweet, some sexual, continued long after their official breakup. His attorney tried to cast doubt, pointing out inconsistencies between Cassie's 2023 statements and her current testimony. The defense argued that the rape was never mentioned in texts, that Cassie continued to show affection. Cassie didn't deny it, she simply told the truth as she understood it, as complicated as it is and was. She denied filing the lawsuit for financial gain. Cassie explained the $20 million settlement was not a payday, but that it was a reckoning. She said her family's temporary move to the East Coast had nothing to do with money. It was about making space and healing and moving on. The defense showed Cassie's Instagram post from May of 2024 that followed the CNN broadcast of the security footage that showed Diddy attacking her. She wrote, "Domestic violence is the issue." It was an attempt to reframe her own lived experience and truth on that stand and in her prior lawsuit. An attempt to say that this was quote unquote just abuse and not sex trafficking and not racketeering. But to Cassie and to those who listened closely, the line between emotional imprisonment and physical violence, between isolation and systemic exploitation, had always been blurred. The defense's final move was to bring it back to the intimate text messages where Cassie had appeared enthusiastic about the freak-offs, messages that the defense tried to use again in an attempt to paint her as a willing participant in her own humiliation. On redirect, prosecutor Emily Johnson handed the rest of the story back to Cassie. Cassie cried as she recalled being beaten during those encounters. She said, quote, "It made me feel worthless, like dirt, like I was nothing," end quote. She admitted that there had been a time that she was more open to exploring those sexual experiences with Diddy, but things only got worse as time went on. The drugs, the pressure, the threat of being exposed, the blackmail, and the bruises. Quote, "I was worried for my safety. I worried for my career," end quote. She worried she would never get out of this alive. Cassie said that she was expecting to receive a $10 million settlement from the Intercontinental Hotel in LA, where she was assaulted in 2016. The hotel knew, and the silence had a cost. Now, in a federal courtroom, she explained why she had finally come forward. Quote, "I can't carry this anymore. I can't carry the shame, the guilt," end quote. There's a question that seems to come up under nearly every story of domestic abuse. Why didn't she just leave? Why would she go back? And if you've ever read the comment sections under posts or articles where a woman goes public about what happened to her, you know how quickly the unsympathetic and downright heartless comments pile up. People jump to blame her, not the abuser, her. But let's get into the truth backed by neuroscience. I condensed this the best I could because this part could have been another episode in itself. I really dug into the science and had so much written that I might still start a blog on the website and post it there at some point, just to have that piece out there if you'd like to read it, or if someone even stumbles across it who might need it. I'll also have all the links in the show notes to the sources that have the information that I've been studying and learning about, so that way you can do some research when you have some downtime if you'd like to. The science of it all makes it clear that leaving is not as simple as packing a bag and walking out the door. Abuse changes the brain, literally, physically, chemically, and emotionally. It rewires how you think, how you feel, how you remember, and how you react to danger. When someone experiences domestic violence, especially over a long time, the brain goes into a constant state of survival. Most of us have heard of fight or flight, but there's also another response that's just as real: freeze. The brain becomes hyper-focused on staying safe, not escaping. The amygdala, which is the part of the brain that acts like a smoke alarm, becomes overactive. It's always on high alert, always scanning for danger, even in moments that are quiet. That part of the brain learns that any wrong move could trigger violence. So, to survive, victims often become compliant, silent, and still. It's not weakness, it's adaptation. It's the brain protecting the body, the only way it knows how. At the same time, the hippocampus, which helps you form and store memories, actually shrinks. That's the part of the brain that helps you make sense of what's happening. But abuse throws everything into confusion. The trauma scrambles the memory, and victims often feel like they're in a fog, unsure of what happened first, what was real, and what was said. That's not a coincidence. It's how the brain responds to repeated trauma. Then there's the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that handles decision making, problem solving, and impulse control. Under chronic abuse, it weakens. That makes it harder for someone to plan their escape or even imagine life outside of that relationship. it becomes incredibly difficult to see choices clearly. Every option feels dangerous, even hopeless. Something that people rarely talk about is how domestic violence is a major cause of TBI, traumatic brain injury. Yes, just like with football players or car crash survivors. Head injuries, often from being hit, shoved, or strangled, are incredibly common in abusive relationships. NPR recently reported that domestic violence is now one of the leading causes of TBI among women. These aren't just bruises or black eyes. We're talking about long term neurological damage. In many cases, women are walking around with undiagnosed concussions or memory loss, struggling with light sensitivity, balance issues, and chronic headaches, and no one's asking why. Not doctors, not police, not the court system, and definitely not the people in the comment section. The Brain Injury Association of America has pushed to raise awareness around this because the signs of brain injury in abuse victims are often misinterpreted. Survivors might seem quote unquote off, confused, anxious, or inconsistent in their stories, when what they really need is medical care, not judgment. So when you ask, why didn't she leave? Remember, her brain might be literally injured. Her ability to think clearly, to remember, and to act might be compromised. She might be in a trauma bond where abuse and affection are tangled up so tightly that it's hard to tell which is which. She might be terrified, dissociated, or just desperately trying to make it through the day without getting hurt again. The real question is not, why didn't she leave? It's, what happened to her brain that made leaving seem so impossible? Let's ask ourselves, what can we do to create a world where she never had to survive this in the first place? Before we close, I want to acknowledge something important again, if this was missed during the beginning. The effects of domestic abuse on the brain are devastating, absolutely regardless of gender. But studies have found that the neurological changes caused by trauma can look different in the female brain versus the male brain. That doesn't mean men don't suffer. In fact, I've done so many episodes that I hope you go back and listen to that are about men who were the victims or survivors of their partners being violent and or abusive in many forms. It only means their brains may react or recover in different ways. And I would like to do an episode in the near future where we explore what trauma does to the male brain. Today's focus was on the female brain because the victim blaming in this case was directed at a woman who had been hurt, judged, and then shamed for not leaving. No matter the gender of the victim, though, the blame never belongs on anyone else but the abuser. Abuse changes the brain. It rewires how a person thinks, remembers, and feels safe in the world. And no one should ever be faulted for doing what they had to do to survive. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and until next week, friends, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode. As we close out, let us not forget awareness is our greatest defense. In a world that can be dark and grim, vigilance is our beacon of hope. When it comes to the cases we have explored together that have remained unsolved, if you happen to hold a piece of the puzzle, dare to step forward. As author Lois McMaster Bujold once said, the dead cannot cry out for justice. It is a duty of the living to do so for them. Until we reconvene, my friends, stay vigilant, and stay informed.